Hi everyone, my name is Ariana, and today I'm going to be exploring two texts from week 7, both written by French philosophers in the 70s and 80s, critiquing modernist and postmodernist thinking and the roles media played in each era. The first text to analyze is The Procession of Simulacra, written by Jean Baudrillard, published in 1981. Baudrillard was best known for his analysis of media, contemporary culture, and technological communication in what we consider the postmodern era, just after modernity ended completely by the 1960s. In the text, he covers topics of reality, hyperreality, simulation, which is another word for simulacra, deterrence, and media, specifically the upcoming digital age of cinema and photography as a new form of communication. The basis of the essay, simulacra, refers to copies, or basically depicting things that had no original or no longer has an original. So creating a whole new something, a whole new reality in place of actual reality. And this new reality is called a hyperreality. And to distinguish between reality and hyperreality, Baudrillard uses the relation between map and territory to define it. So, in reality, the territory defines the map, and the map is based off of what the territory looks like, and it's based off of the real, actual territory. But in hyperreality, the territory defines the map. The map is just a guide of the territory to define the basics of the territory. So the territory is now kind of telling the map what roads to include, what colors to use. The map is no longer using the colors that it sees in the territory or the facts of the territory. Baudrillard makes many notable points in his essay, but one I'd specifically like to point out is his take on the shift from time to space in the era of shifting from modernism to postmodernism, and the concept of hyperspace in postmodernism. So we're more concerned with our proximity to things in relation to space rather than time. And so he writes, "We are witnessing the end of perspectival and panoptic space." And that's his perspective on media and reality TV during the time where cinematography and photography was coming out, and that was the newest form of communication where nobody had anything up for interpretation, like in art or literature. Signs and symbols and motion pictures were being thrown at you and shown at you now in a way fast enough for you to recognize the signs and symbols and know their meaning and know what the message was. The media became the message in the era of postmodernism. But this now poses a problem in postmodernism because of the hyperrealities we're creating, and the line between reality and hyperreality is now so blurred we can't make a distinction, posing a danger because these hyperrealities can have real-life impacts and effects on society. And this is the problem with media in postmodernism that he's critiquing in the essay, in terms of the simulations we're living in. Now that we know what's going on in the age of postmodernism, the question still lingers: what is postmodernism exactly in comparison to modernism, and what exactly happened in the shift in the era? And we'll turn to Jean-François Lyotard to explain that shift. Jean-François Lyotard was best known for his articulation of postmodernism after the late 1970s, obviously long after modernism ended, and he focuses on comparing modernism and postmodernism in terms of aesthetics, which refers to the literature, the art, writing, painting, the cinema, and photography going on at the time. In postmodernism, we now play these language games, similar to Foucault's indexing discourses, being subject to a certain discourse or being subject to a certain conversation that is brought to the table because of its popularity and how important it is deemed by society. And using these language games, it becomes harder to distinguish between the hyperreal and the real. And so this shift in postmodernism and the emphasis on the real and representing the real is actually ironic because of the hyper-realities we're living in. So then the question becomes, how do we represent reality, and is that even possible to do so given there's a gap between the subject and the object? And this very gap between subject and object is what points us to critiquing postmodernism. In the modernist period, it was a time of enlightenment, and there was an emphasis on artistic expression. There was an emphasis on abstraction and finding messages in the media. The media was not the message in modernism. And in postmodernism, with that shift, it was an end of a period of experimentation where things now had to be calculated in terms of what was popular, what wasn't, and what was desired and what wasn't. Art was no longer for art's sake, if you will. In relation to the media in postmodernism, Lyotard makes a powerful point on subjects now being determined by what is popular rather than what is real, and the dangers in this shift in the era of contemporary times, especially relating to the commodification of art. He states, "Capitalism inherently possesses the power to derealize familiar objects, social roles, and institutions to such a degree that the so-called realistic representations can no longer evoke reality except as nostalgia or mockery, as an occasion for suffering rather than satisfaction." The term he uses, derealize, refers to making something no longer real by imitating it as a realistic representation. We see the theme of Baudrillard's work here, in that capitalism has caused the art to shift into realism in the postmodern age, but in doing so, it actually creates a hyper-reality because it is imitating the real. Yet, this has influenced the greater ideologies of the population to conform, to determine what is deemed as good art and bad art in terms of popular belief. He shared the phenomena which we can still see today, where those who conform their arts to popular ideals then lead to careers in mass conformism by communicating, because of the praise essentially they're getting for their conformity. They are spreading the greater message accepted by society, adding to the shift in the aim to fit the model of postmodernist ideologies. In doing so, the real is no longer real. It's now a hyper-real of what we think society wants or expects. It's not what we actually feel or think or see, which poses a problem in society. So now we must ask ourselves, what is postmodernism? And to that I say modernism and postmodernism is cyclical, and they go hand in hand. In postmodernism, which can be described as times today, contemporary times, we live in simulations of hyper-realities caused by the outcomes of modernism, like capitalism and media, creating a kind of utilitarian society focused on attaining unrealistic and sometimes intangible validations from greater societal views, expectations, and pressures. And through questioning the real and challenging to be abstract, we can truly live a postmodernist life in these contemporary times.